Hello, 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 all. Happy Wednesday. It's hump day. Woo! Let's see who's joining us today. We're super excited. It's another great Wednesday. It's a beautiful day in Chicago, although it is cold outside. So I don't know where you guys are from, but as you're coming in, just drop it in the chat and say hi and tell us where you're coming from. Hi, Aaron. Hi, Joey. Hi, Karen. Hey, Maria. You guys can let us know where you're joining us from. That would be great. We love to see where people are coming from all over the country. Hey, Andrew from Minnesota. Andrew's our tech for today. We're so happy to have him because he's the mom. So great. As you guys are coming in, do me a favor and not only tell us where you're joining us from, but Andrew's going to drop the link in the chat, and then feel free to take and share that link with your network. Share it on Facebook, share it on Instagram. Go ahead and invite them to be a part of today's conversation because it's about to be off the chain and we don't want them to miss it. Okay? All right. So do that for me. Thank you, Andrew. You can even shoot it an email. Hey, guess what? I'm attending this great webinar today. And you don't want to miss this. Okay, let's see. Welcome, welcome. As you're coming in, hello, hello. Go ahead and say hello and then tell us where you're joining us from. Maria, oh, you're from Berwyn. Cool. Is it cold in Washington, Tish?
It is chilly. It's a nice chill, but hey, this is that good fall weather that I love. So
I hate it. I only hate it because in Chicago, I don't know if Washington is like us. With we only have like 2 months of really nice weather, or 3 months, mid-June through August, and then September all the way until mid-June is pretty cold. Like, can't get a break.
I don't envy you.
Hey, Natalie. No, it doesn't. Like, I relish every cold day once fall, every sunny day. I relish it. I'm like, yes, thank you, because in a minute we won't have, the sun is going to go away and we'll be cold. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started because we're going to do the opening slides. So we're going to do that. I want to welcome everybody to our Staying Strong and Positive for ourselves and our children. This is our daily webinar. We've been doing these since the pandemic shut down, March 2020, as a way to keep us all connected so people wouldn't feel isolated. And then it just grew to this grand opportunity to share great people, great resources, great organizations with our viewing audience, which is a mix of both parents and providers. And so we're super excited for everybody who's here today, and for all of you guys who are going to join us via YouTube and watch this afterwards. Andrew, next slide, please. So these are the ways that we engage when we're in the webinar. When you're ready to speak, just raise your hand and we'll ask you to unmute yourself. Feel free to type your comments in the group chat. Make sure it's going to everybody. So that little caret right there, if you don't make sure it's going to everyone, it's just going to go to us, the presenters, or the panelists. Nobody will see it. And then please be patient with us. When conversations get really good, like I believe this one is going to be today, it's going to get really good. And so just be patient with us if we don't get to you as soon as you raise your hand. Okay. Next. These are agreements, and I love our agreements because it's how we encourage you to be brave. It's how we try to create an emotionally safe space or safer space. So we ask you to speak from your own experience and use I statements as you're sharing today. And this stops us from talking about other people's experiences. Follow the golden rule, treat other people the way you want to be treated. And this sort of wraps up all of our cafe agreements, like no judgment, because you can get that on social media, not giving advice because nobody asked you, all those great things. Just really speak from your own experience when you feel like you want to do advice and all that stuff. And then full presence, please no multitasking. We know that it's lunchtime, so feel free to eat. But if you're like doing a whole bunch of other stuff, you're going to miss out on some really great information. And we really don't want you to. We want you to be fully present with us. If you need a minute, take a minute. Um, take care of yourself as adults and come back when you're ready to. Okay. And I already see people saying I agree in the chat. Yay! I love when people agree to keep the space safe so we can have great conversations. Thank you all. Fantastic. All right, I think we can keep moving, Andrew. So today, our today's topic is finding and strengthening advocacy, finding and strengthening your voice to make change. I am super excited about today's presentation. One, because one of our family members, one of our Be Strong Families family members, is presenting. And we've been trying to have this conversation and this webinar since June, maybe June or July, so like the last 3 months. So I'm super excited that she's finally here with her co-presenter, and they are going to share today in an amazing way. But let me introduce them to you, okay? So I'm talking about Latisha Atkins, JD. She's a president and founder. Go ahead and wave, Tish. For over 15 years, she has worked as a senior level advisor with the nonprofit organizations and government agencies. From 2006 until currently, she has worked on behalf of the Ward 7 and 8 communities, conducting outreach and engagement activities with key stakeholders. From 2009 to 2014, she served 2 mayors of the District of Columbia in various capacities, and most recently worked as the executive director of the Mayor's Office on Women's Policy and Initiatives and the DC Commission for Women. Here, she serves as an advocate to over 300,000 women and girls in the district, and focus on enhancing the quality of life for all women and their families through the review and research of existing law and policies, public hearings, listening sessions, and community town halls. Latisha holds a BA in political science from Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, and a Juris Doctorate degree from the George Washington University Law School of Washington, D.C. I'm super excited to have her here with us today. And with her is Susie Cambria, MSW. She's a co-founder and vice president. Susie is a public policy, budget, and social media consultant working with not-for-profits and small women-owned businesses in DC and Virginia. In her more than 25 years working in the District of Columbia, Susie worked in and with local nonprofits and the DC government. She established herself as a budget and policy wonk who created processes and practices related to budget advocacy, which are still used today. While in DC government, Susie wrote the annual children's budget, helped create the code emergency plan and protocols, managed social media for the Mayor's Summer Initiative, and several other collaborative projects. In Virginia, Susie has done social media and other outreach for women-owned businesses and the county government. Susie received her Master's of Social Work from the Howard University School of Social Work, Washington, D.C. In May 1997, her studies focused on the macro level in the area of children and families. We are super excited to have you both here with us today, and I'm looking forward to what you share with us today. I'm going to turn my camera off and turn it over to you guys. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Sarita, for that warm welcome. And as Sarita indicated, I'm especially excited to be here because I am a part of the Be Strong Families community. And so anytime I get an opportunity to come here and show up for Be Strong Families, I welcome that opportunity. So today, what are we here to talk about? Advocating for change, finding and strengthening your voice to make change. Advocacy, what is that word all about? And I don't know who's in the room, but I believe that there's probably people here who are probably doing advocacy work already, either in their communities or in their respective organizations. And also understanding there could be people who are here just to learn what advocacy is all about. And so in order to frame this context, to frame this word, I want to give us a baseline of what advocacy is and what it's all about. And so just by definition, advocates plead in favor of a cause. Okay. Oftentimes, advocates work in the face of opposition for the things that matter the most to their local communities. Advocacy work may be a response to an injustice, a felt need or an unacceptable situation. But oftentimes it is a cry for change. And sometimes it's an attempt to stop change, right? And so, just wanting again to create this baseline for you. But again, when we think about advocacy work, we understand that it's usually a demand. It could be a demand for better laws, better policies, recognition. It could be a demand for increased funding. It could also be a demand, again, to make change in your respective communities or to stop that change. And we understand also in this realm of advocacy work that in pursuing our goals for the community, we may need to be advocates, which literally means to cry out in favor. So again, we're going to just go through and unpeel this word advocacy a bit more over the next few slides. But the one thing that I want you to remember as we go through this is that advocacy involves education and often advocacy. Advocacy involves education and activism. So it's really about educating yourself on the issues that matter the most to you and your community, and then taking a stance or acting on that education that you may have learned. And over the next few slides, again, we're going to kind of talk through this a little bit more. So we can move over to the next slide, Andrew, as we talk about our learning objectives for today's training. And so again, we're going to learn about the guidelines for effective advocacy. Excuse me, folks, I'm dealing with a little bit of sinus residuals. Secondly, we're looking to learn about advocacy techniques and how do you potentially develop or establish your advocacy goals for your organization or your community. And then we're going to share some additional online resources to help support you in your advocacy efforts. Okay, so we can move over to the next slide, Andrew. And who we are. Thank you again, Sarita, for doing that warm welcome and giving our background. But at the end of the day, Susie and I are just community folks who saw a need in our respective communities and felt that we wanted to make change. And we came together to form Building Bridges to Success to help others be able to form their voices and strengthen their voices. And Building Bridges to Success, our mission is to build the capacity of communities to engage others in a shared vision for its own growth and development. Traditionally, we have worked with communities that are often disengaged from the process. And that disengagement could be either self-imposed or it can be imposed by other entities. So oftentimes what we look to do is to go in and skill up communities, again, that feel that they may not have a voice, to help them to identify their voice and strengthen that, but also to be able to work with those folks who are in power to be able to see the value in working with these communities. So we kind of see ourselves as a bridge between those in power and a bridge between those communities that feel that they don't have power. And so we work to build that cohesiveness and to see each other as partners in the work that we're doing to strengthen our communities. All right, so we can move over to the next slide. I love this photo here for a reason. I'm a big proponent of women's empowerment. And when I think about the women's suffrage movement, this is one of those movements that literally changed the trajectory of Americans' history, right? And what we do know about the movement is that it literally took 143 years for American women to achieve or to receive the right to vote. From 1777 to 1920, American women fought to have the right to vote. And so when we think about advocacy, first things first is that we want you all to know that, yes, sometimes change takes time, and it can take, decades, and it can also take centuries for those things that we are seeking to have come to fruition to actually happen. And so again, just visualize this photo and remember, in the work that you're doing in your communities, the advocacy work that you're seeking to do on behalf of your organizations, that it may not happen overnight, but to stay encouraged, because if you stay at it, it change will eventually happen. And we can go over to the next slide, and I will turn it over to Susie.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This is exciting, and this is what I love doing besides budget work, is helping people find their voice. I mean, people have voices, helping people figure out how to navigate. And so I'm thrilled that Tish invited me, and that Be Strong Families really wanted to do this. I think Andrew set up a poll, right? Yes. Do you see yourself as an advocate? And if you would just check one of the three options, yes, no, or not yet. And then I'm just going to go on, and we'll report back as soon as everybody or a majority of people have spoken. 15 seconds. Terrific. Okay. In the meantime, can you go to the next slide? Ooh, look what we have. So we've got 92% of people say yes, they see themselves as an advocate. No has 0. Yay. And not yet 8. Good. This is excellent. So advocating for change. As Krista said, advocates act in favor of a cause. They call for positive change, and often in the face of direct opposition. Sometimes, as you know, it may be indirect, and the opposition can be rather stealthy. But the more you do this and the more you're out in the world, you know that about people. Just some examples, particularly about advocacy and community work. Advocacy in the context of community work can involve institutions, right? So it could be schools, right? So we saw some of that work while schools were closed during COVID. Parents and others calling for weekend meals, calling for internet access for kids and families that didn't have it, calling for school supplies. It could also be governments, right? Because governments are institutions too. And at the end of the day, it's about fixing a problem, policy, or practice. And so as I was thinking about some examples, like a big issue would be this whole basic income movement, right? Some people are doing it through what we would consider straight up advocacy, going to their government, having governments put money in, doing these pilot programs. Other communities have done it by raising money on their own and enrolling people on their own, and then seeing, how the experiment rolled out. It could be smaller things that are also high impact. In DC, when the children's, oh my God, my brain is going to fail me. When CHIP was implemented in DC back in the 90s, we had a partnership. The organization I worked for at the time, DC Action for Children, had a partner with something like 40 other nonprofits and a whole bunch of government agencies. One of the things we did was set up a special office in the Medicaid office, and they were the ones that processed the CHIP applications. So if there was a problem, we didn't have to worry about all the social service reps trying to deal with the problem and figure out what the solution was. We had 2 people, we had a supervisor and a worker, and if that didn't work quickly enough, we could always go to the agency director. And so I mean, it was a high impact improvement we made that we advocated for, but it's certainly nothing on the scale of basic income. Then there, advocacy at the community level and with community engagement obviously involves actions. So it's letter writing, it's protests, it's sort of all the things you think about when we do advocacy. It can be used as part of a community effort. So if you think back to Tish's introductory remarks, she talked about advocacy being education and activism. And so with community, what you very often find, whether it's a community of professionals or a community, a neighborhood or a school community, you really need to educate everyone on what the basics of the maybe the policy challenges, and then you do all of this information gathering from people about what their personal, what the impact is on people, and then you sort of marry those and you figure out then what your activism is going to be. And I think that's really the sweet spot of advocacy. Even though I was a professional advocate, I was basically a lobbyist for 20 something years. The sweet spot for me really was like the work that Tish is particularly doing now and has done over the years, where it, and the work that Bridges does, which is combining community residents and other organizations that serve people and advocates who may have access that other people don't have. And then there are the obvious, you know, some more detail on the actions. You can testify, you can protest, you can do Twitter storms, you can do fun kinds of things. We had once done a Halloween costume parade for our local city council. And kids dressed up and they had a message, and it was about, we wanted a fair budget because people have many, many needs. And so we didn't want the council, when they were doing the budget, to take money from food and put it in housing, right? We wanted the council to take money from some other thing, that some other non-human needs issue, and put it into that. And so there are a lot of ways to do advocacy, other than just testifying and writing letters and writing op-eds. Tish, anything to add?
No, you know, I would, just as you were saying, I was thinking about a recent incident here in Washington, D.C., in my community, where, you know, there is a proposed 300-bed halfway house coming into the community. And of course, their supporters, where there are folks who are arguing against that, and then there's folks who are proponents of the halfway house coming, because we all believe that folks who are re-entering back into the community should have a place to come back to, particularly if this is home. And you know, throughout that, you know, the rhetoric and all the back and forth, we realized that not many people were educated on the subject, you know, and what the needs of you know, these men would be as they re-enter back into the community. And so myself and a small group of other advocates, you know, really began to kind of change the narrative and shift the narrative and begin to educate people. And so I think, as you mentioned, there's many different ways to go about doing advocacy. It doesn't have to be, you know, writing letters or whatever, but it really boils down to educating yourself on the issue so that you are better prepared to argue, you know, for or against that thing which you want. And so just wanted to call that out, because that just immediately came to my head, because we're still going through that and we don't know where the chips will fall. But, you know, we are hoping that the community is able to make a wise decision as they either argue for it or against this halfway house coming into our neighborhoods.
Excellent. So the next slide, please, sir. Tish, is that you or me? Maybe me, since I'm speaking. So I think this is really important. Perhaps we should remind ourselves that the ultimate purpose of education is not to know, but to act, right? It's really to prime our brains and prime other parts of us to be able to understand challenges and understand what potential solutions are, right? You can always learn details. But if we learn anything through this today, I hope you leave with the idea that, advocacy isn't one particular thing. It's just this bucket or bag or satchel, or pick a thing full of ways you can do advocacy, and that even then you will, as time goes on, you will find more, right? And this container never gets full, right? There are just always more ideas, some good ideas, some bad ideas, some ideas you may just squirrel away and use later. But I think that this is really important to keep in mind, and that there is no advocacy without action.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, you got to take that step. Complaining about it isn't advocacy. It isn't. And I'm the queen of complaints. Okay, next slide. We're going to dig a little deeper. So there are 3 P's of advocacy. You can read this later. It's, participation, as we just said, in all manner of government processes or other institutional processes. It's about petitions. It's about writing letters, somehow communicating disagreement and a solution with the targets that you're focusing on. And then what I'm growing fonder and fonder of these days is the protest and peaceful assembly, marches, vigils, and gatherings. And I would include like the Halloween costume parade and all of those other things in there that really are the home for all of your creative ideas.
I love that idea.
What, the Halloween costume parade?
I love it.
Yeah. So is anybody from DC or the DC area participating today? So we had a council member, just a quick story. So we had a council member who didn't always vote the way we wanted her to, or didn't always end up on the side that we wanted. But she was a lovely person, and we had notified the council that we were going to be there. So the council members, there were 13 of them. They had their offices decorated. We had people go ahead so that they would turn the lights off and make it their offices really spooky. They had candy and fruit. It was great. Well, this one particular council member saw the kids, like me, followed by like 30 or 40 3- and 4-year-olds all dressed up. She was leading a public hearing, like flew up out of her chair, ran to her office so she could be there. And then I think she'd been a teacher and in a prior life, and so was amazingly good with the kids, asking them about this. But it was super important for her. Like, it was a photo op for her. For us, it was an opportunity to get in the Washington Post and the Washington Times, and then spread the news pretty broadly that this person, not only it wasn't just a success because it was a success. It was a success in and of itself. The kids, we did some lessons with the kids, but it was that this council member understood the importance of being seen with a bunch of little kids, and who were carrying it was this, for Fair Budget Coalition, it was this puzzle person, right? So, food was one little piece, housing was another little piece, safety was another piece. So when the photo was taken, we also managed to get the puzzle person in there. So that was in the Post and the Times and other news outlets. And so I think it's just interesting. It's just another way to get the word out. Okay, next slide.
And Susie, before we go over to that next slide, I wanted to ask, how important do you think the media is in how we engage the media in our advocacy efforts?
I think the media is important. And I think it's one of the tools that we're not really, that many of us aren't good at. I mean, I cuss like a sailor. As you know, I will not today, and it's hard. And at some point I had to strike a deal with the press that I'd cuss and they would not ignore me, that they would just not print the bad words. But I also, and I didn't just go to them with stories I wanted them to cover, right? Like they knew they could call me as background or off the record. I was always giving them like intelligence from the council or from the mayor's office, or, you know, things I'd heard at meetings that weren't bad for what we wanted, but just sort of supported our position. But I do think much more attention needs to be paid getting people ready to talk to the media, and that the media aren't, like, journalists aren't scary people. Yeah, I think that that's a hugely important
As you were talking
sort of
about
tactic source.
And as you were talking about the experience with the news ops, I'm thinking about a previous council member that I worked for in Ward 7, and there were some issues with the grocery store who was not selling, you know, they were selling bad meat, you know, just so many complaints we were getting from the community about this grocery store and the quality of food that they were serving. And we're already considered to be in a food desert in this community. And you're talking about over 80,000 people who only have 2 grocery stores, you know, to go to in the community, and one of which is very subpar. And they own the second one, which was a little better because of this area it was in. And I remember the council member brought some top executives to his office to have a meeting. They thought that they were going to show up and talk about, you know, some potential tax abatements that help them grow. And he just nailed them with all these concerns that the community was having. And they were just like deers in headlights. And so after they stepped out of this meeting with him, he had already arranged to have the media there. And so not only were they forced to respond to the community's concerns in this meeting, but they stepped out in the news cameras where they're asking them these exact same questions. And guess what? That grocery store made a lot, almost like a 180 degree turn. And so, you know, now as a result, you know, they're building a new grocery store, but they realize that the community, you know, that the community has needs, the community wants fresh quality grocers. So that's why I asked that question about the news media.
Yep. Well, and I wouldn't go to that grocery store you're talking about when I lived there.
Absolutely.
Yep. Cool. Okay. Oh my God, there are so many things that you guys can do. So the things you have to remember when you're developing your advocacy plan, you know, really being honest about what you know and what you don't know. That includes, you know, who's against you, who your allies can be, what the sort of subtext of issues is. I mean, I remember working on youth violence before I went to work for the mayor. And I thought I knew what the history of this one particular youth violence prevention organization was, and then how it got translated into something else. Well, it took me years to figure out that I had no idea what the truth of the matter was, because nobody was opening up. They all thought that the history didn't matter. And in fact, it did. It was one of the reasons why we weren't ever able to move the needle on some violence prevention stuff in the city. And so I cannot emphasize enough that you don't need to know everything about your issue, but you need to know a lot, and you need to really challenge yourself to know a lot, and just sort of ask, I mean, do the, you know, who else should I talk to about this kind of thing? Because it certainly would have made my life easier, and it wouldn't, and more important than that, like, who cares if my life's easier? It would have made an appreciable difference to people in the community. And then like, what else do you need to know about, right? So it's doing, research in the community. It's asking people in a number of different ways, with a number of different carrots from a number of different organizations, what their experiences with X, Y, and Z issue problem. And what you'll very often learn is that that's not even what their top problem is. Right? Their concern is something completely different. But research is super important, which then leads to direct action tactics. You will get the slides, and it has all the notes. And we've got, I think I printed this out for myself. I can't even count the number of page 10s. I think there's 7 page notes for page 10, which is this slide. You can, y'all can read. You can write letters, you can do petitions, you can organize a strike, you can do all those things. I think the thing I would like, the lesson I learned, and it took me a long time to get there, was to not be afraid to do something, to have somebody or a set of somebodies you can bounce ideas off of. This isn't covered in this presentation, but I'll just segue for a second. I had a very good friend who happened to also be an MSW and a practicing social worker. I wasn't practicing. And we called it the Stupid Question Club. So it was virtually every morning, Monday through Friday, I would call this person, and it would either be a writing style question, it would be a grammar question, because she excelled at both of those, and she was an extraordinary advocate. And so I would be able to test ideas with her, or just say, oh, like, really, this time you've gone too far. Like, nice idea, but no. And so I think, having someone that person helped me be a really good advocate for a gazillion years. And thank goodness she's still in DC and doing public policy work. But think about opportunities and then take advantage of those. I was telling Tish earlier that one of the things I did that I'm most proud of in DC, and it paid off a lot, was that I was on a federal jury. And so I was out of work for like 3 months. And the only times I could see the mayor, whom I knew well because I had testified before his committee and I knew his staff really well, was to go to his cabinet meetings, which he said were going to be in the community. And I was the only person who went out to these cabinet meetings, and the media would be there. So not only did I get to grab a particular or several particular agency directors or deputy mayors or the mayor himself, I was able to talk to the media, and the media then could eavesdrop on these conversations I was having with the cabinet members. And that was important. I mean, it wasn't like I was important, right? Understand, it's not that I was important. It's that's how for 3 months, that was the only opportunity I had, other than making calls at lunchtime, which is when everybody else was calling these people. The Halloween costume parade. What else did we? I mean, God, there were so many things we did. For when we wanted the rainy day fund used in DC during one of the economic downturns, we bought the little paper umbrellas, like cocktail umbrellas, and everybody wore them. You can't protest in the chamber, but the men would put it in their buttonholes. And I saw the CFO, who was this very staid gentleman, and his staff didn't push me physically, but pushed me away. And he's like, he's not going to wear this thing, right? Like we're not going to use the rainy day fund. And he's like, no, this is a really good idea. Right. And so I'm going to take her stupid little drink umbrella. And he put it in his lapel. He didn't do what we wanted, but he understood what it was. We didn't get all of we wanted, we got some of what we wanted. And so, be creative and be memorable.
Yes.
I guess, like at the end of the day, through all of these things and the 10 pages of page 10 that you will receive when you get that presentation. Tish, anything to add?
No, only that you have, been my guiding light in a lot of the work that we do in the community and being able to bounce those ideas off. And I just remember when we were working with the youth over in Benning Terrace, a community in Ward 7, and what we did, again, let me tell you folks, elected officials love to interact with youth, right? Even though they may not be able to vote, when you have educated youth, and what we did is we took the youth through a process where it was a violence interruption thing. This community plagued with a lot of violence, and we had the youth to actually research some of the initiatives that had been implemented years before they were even here, right? They may have been babies when the government stepped in. This is how long this community had been besieged with violence. And they were able to see that, they had some leaders who actually stood up through the research, and they saw where funding was placed to launch all these new initiatives. And they wrote this really excellent brief that was shared with the city council and the mayor. And as a result, we had the deputy mayor for public safety and justice come out and sit down with these youth in their community and talk about what it is they needed. Is it more recreational activities? Is it more money for education and college funds? And literally, we also had the deputy mayor for housing, because this was a public housing community, come out and talk about the conditions of the community. So like Susie said, just to echo what she says, get creative. These are just a few samples of tactics that you can use, but there's so many different tactics that you can use to stand out from the crowd, right? Because, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. That's one of my favorite sayings. But also another one of my favorite sayings is that power concedes nothing without a fight. So, sometimes you have to fight hard, and sometimes it could just be a gentle nudge, but, whatever it is, you definitely have to plan for that advocacy, that plan. You have to plan for that plan, right? You have to be strategic, be intentional, and be thoughtful around what it is you're going to do to meet that end goal. That's all I had to add.
Excellent. Okay, next slide. Please, sir.
All right, and I think this is me. All right,
Yep.
we're getting across with all downhill now. So 5 steps to effective advocacy, and you can read them, but I just want to reiterate a couple of them, and that is what we've been saying is know your facts. Whatever that issue, we're all passionate about something, right? And so I tell folks, don't lead with your emotions, right? It's good to be passionate as long as that passion leads you to activism or to act on that. And so whatever you're passionate about, whatever that issue that you believe is most important to you and your community, know that issue inside out. And if you don't have someone on your team that does, right, you may not know it, or you may not be good at doing the research, knowing the data and the statistics around the issue, but find someone who does. Make friends with people in the government who have access to that information, right? Because you want to know that issue inside and out as much as possible. Key, so critical is that you need to be able to listen to the people that you want to help, right? As an advocate, we never go into a community, I call it parachuting, where you go into a community and you think you know the answers for that community. Trust me, every community is armed with the knowledge needed to make their changes from inside out, right? And so all you need to do is simply show up Show people that you care, because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? So go and show people that you care and that you're really there to help them and be a part of their team. So listening to these people to hear what they feel or how they feel about those issues. And that goes hand in hand with engaging the community. How can you say you're going to advocate for a community if you don't engage with them, right? If you don't know what the issues are inside and out, okay? And build relationships. I say that as advocates, our role really is, not, I don't really say help people find their voice. They already have that voice. They just don't realize it. So how can you equip them with the tools to strengthen the voice so that they can be able to advocate for themselves? So building those relationships with those key stakeholders, with those government officials, with the people who have access to the power around that issue, building those relationships. And sometimes that relationship may be a positive, it could be a negative, but as long as they know you are in that space, trust me, I believe that they will come to you and seek you out when they need to have more information about that issue. And then just be persistent, right? I saw a few slides ago, we talked about, it took 143 years for American women to get the right to vote, right? That's a very long time. That torch was passed down from many, many people until Susan B. Anthony and all of those women in Seneca Valley got that torch and were able to get that vote, that women's, the suffrage movement across the finish line. Don't give up in the face of adversity. Don't give up in the tough times. Keep going, and you may have to pivot, you may have to change. And I always say, as you get older and you're looking to pass that torch, strengthen up those younger people behind you, right? So that they can help carry that fight on. So 5 steps to effective advocacy, and we can move on to the next one. And I see a question in the chat. All right, so just looking at somebody said that's smart. Thank you, whichever comment that was. That's the most succinct way to describe any of this. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Absolutely. When I came into the community in Ward 7, I was new. And, I took a job in the community, and I decided that I wanted to move into the community because, again, I didn't want to parachute into the community. And one of the first stakeholders I met when we were being introduced, her first thing was, why should I want to get to know you, right? And that goes back to that point. And then Sarita asked a question, Susie, how do you engage if you don't know how much to listen? Okay, right, got you. How do you engage if you don't know how to listen? Absolutely. And so, so I guess as we close out with these next few slides, I want to talk a little bit about the 3 phases of advocacy. And in the late 90s, the U.S. Agency for International Development, that's a mouthful, it's the agency that actually provides assistance to emerging democracies in underdeveloped countries around the world. They were looking for a way to go in and to assist these countries best develop from oftentimes more authoritative regimes to more democratic regimes. And so what they did is they commissioned a white paper around how do we help these communities? How do we best support these countries? Become democratic countries, right? And so out of that was these 3 phases of advocacy. And the first one, as you see, is called transformational advocacy. And this is not going to read it all. You all are pretty intelligent on this webinar. So, but what I want to do is hone in on a few points. And that's the ability of the marginalized or those people who are perceived to be powerless to really challenge the status quo, right? We know, in America, we're blessed that we can challenge the status quo without, fear of retaliation or imprisonment and those things. And so, I say this, to me, the best example of this transformational advocacy, in my opinion, is the civil rights movement, right? And that's where we saw, a community of folks come together and challenge the status quo on the rules, the laws of the nation, and say that they were not fair and they were no longer going to stand for these unfair, unjust laws and legislation that oftentimes did not afford them the same rights as others. And so as a result of the transformational advocacy we saw during the civil rights movement, we saw citizen empowerment, right? And so we saw, the community come together, the African-American community with its allies come together and say, we will no longer stand for this. And they, again, another example of an advocacy movement that changed the trajectory of American history. We can go over to the next one. And if folks have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And this is developmental advocacy. And this is the ability of citizens to organize themselves collectively to alter the existing relations of power by providing themselves with the capacity to identify, articulate, and act on their concerns. I love this picture because this is one of the most recent advocacy movements, and this is what happened a few years back when the youth came to Washington, D.C. to march and fight for gun safety. And we saw through this movement the enactment of a lot of legislation. This movement actually forced congressmen and Senate, those in power, to take a stand on gun violence. And so as we saw as a result of this developmental advocacy, communities being strengthened and communities and societies being strengthened through some of the laws and legislation that came about as a result of this particular advocacy. Again, another great example of advocacy at its best. And we can move over to the last one. And Susie, feel free to jump in and add anything. And this is instrumental advocacy. At the end of the day, advocacy has many different many different ends to the advocacy work that we do. But instrumental advocacy is all about influencing public policy. How do we force those people in power, right, to listen to us, to hear us, and to make changes that impact our lives or our communities? And as you see here, instrumental advocacy is the process in which a group applies a set of skills, those advocacy skills and techniques, to influence public decision making, ultimately achieving a well-defined social, economic, or political policy goal or reform. And as you see, one of those movements is the right for LGBTQ communities to have some of the same rights that others may want or others have in the communities. And so another great example of advocacy work that has changed the trajectory of American history. And you can move us over to the next slide. Wow, I cannot see this, but here's some, okay, Andrew has dropped them in the chat. Thank you, Andrew. My glasses are not functioning appropriately today. So we wanted to leave you with some tools and some things to take away. And here's some links that we thought were really great toolkits for you and your work that you may be doing. And so we start with Advocates for Youth. And again, it's a toolkit. It has some easy to use tools that you may find useful in your work. And then looking at the Harewood Institute, looks at some different approaches to advocacy. Also looking at the teen vote. One thing that I do want to shout out is the Community Toolbox. This is through the University of Kentucky, where when we were looking for a model to actually be able to go out and skill up the residents of the communities we were working for, we chose this model because it looks at community change through a public health lens. And this is a really great resource if you're in the trenches doing the work and you're looking to really do some significant community change. So I definitely would encourage you all to check out those resources. And of course, you can move us over to the next slide. We will be a resource to you also. But before we get to that information, I just wanted to leave you all with this quote, or we wanted to leave you all with this quote from Rosa Parks, who was a civil rights advocate. And I love this quote, I'm leaving this legacy to all of you to bring peace, justice, equality, love, and fulfillment of what our lives should be. Without vision, the people will perish. And without courage and inspiration, dreams will die. The dream of freedom and peace. I think that's such a strong, quote, and it definitely, it captures, what our work is all about. And you can take us over to the next slide. And here's our contact information, and we're going to throw it in the chat. So feel free to reach out to us. We want to continue to be a resource to you. If there's any you want to bounce ideas off of us, we'd be happy to schedule some time to sit down with you and talk more about advocacy, because we love doing advocacy work, not just in this community, but throughout, other communities as well. So thank you for the opportunity to share with you today, and I will turn it back over to Be Strong Families.
Thank you, ladies. This was so good. Thank you so much. I've never had, trying to get my words together. I've never known advocacy like that. I've never really paid attention to it, which was why when you thought of, this topic and finding your voice, I was interested in it, because even though we work with parents and do a lot of work with parents, and we're, parent engagement experts, we don't focus on advocacy, and a lot of agencies focus on advocacy, and that's not our focus. And so I'm always interested when people are like, oh, we advocate. So our way to engage is just a little different. Still as effective, I think, but just we've never advocacy person in that way. Like I advocate for my family, advocate for my children, that kind of advocate for the parents who are part of our process. But like when you talk about the different ways to advocate, I was like, oh, okay, there's some different ways. Like, all right, okay. And so I really appreciate the direct tactics, and I appreciated seeing the 3 different ways that you of advocacy that you can do. So thank you for that. I thought this was a really good presentation today, and I hope that all of you guys who are joining us, I hope you thought so too. Andrew, you can go to the next slide. So like we do with every webinar, we like to find something to amplify at the end of the webinar. So today we've chosen to do #amplify finding your voice. As you listen to today's webinar presentation, what would you like to leave from here amplifying? What will you amplify? Drop it in the chat. #amplify what? Andrew said #amplify advocacy in action. What would you like to put in here? What would you like to amplify this week based on, I love it, Mike, amplify community voices. Yes. Tammy said #amplify get involved. Okay. You guys got some more for us? I love, and we use these later on, #amplify listening, that part, Jolene. Yes, amplify, speak your truth. I love it. Hey, Pam, amplify my engagement. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you, guys. We appreciate that. All right, keep next. Huh. Why can't I talk today? Keep next. Okay, don't forget to join us for this week's Friday Taste of Cafe, Healing Hearts, Navigating Trauma and Loss. This is going to be a fantastic cafe led by the National Parent Cafe Leadership Team here at Be Strong Families. Parent that consists of parents from all over the country. Don't want to miss it. Come have the conversation you need to have. That's going to be deep. Bring your tissues with you. Use the camera and point to the QR code, and they'll take you to register. Okay, don't miss it. Next slide, Andrew. And then don't forget to register for all of our upcoming webinars. We're going to continue to provide these webinars until, I guess, the ancestors whisper and say that's enough. Sort of like how we do our seasoning in African-American homes. So yeah, sign up today, register for the webinars. Don't want to miss it. And of course, we do offer certificates for those of you guys who feel like you need one. They are offered by request. Okay, thank you. Next. And then go ahead and stock up on all of your parent cafe supplies, your parent engagement resources, all that great stuff. Visit our shop. If you had not had a chance to visit our website and check out our shop with all of our great resources, you want to take a stroll over there, go ahead and use your camera, point to the QR code, and it'll take you right there. Next slide. And don't forget to join our YouTube community. Yay! This webinar, today's webinar, and all the webinars that we do are loaded to we're live streaming right there now. So yay, everybody at YouTube land. And you can find these afterwards if you enjoyed these. Go back, visit our YouTube community, and then share this with your networks. Okay, I think this is a great presentation on advocacy. I learned a lot, and I'm sure the people in your network or your agency will also get a lot out of today's webinar. So, and our YouTube journey is growing. So thank you, Tish. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody who joined us. This was fantastic. I learned a lot. I feel like value was added to my day and to my life. Jolene, you got a question right quick? Jolene got a question. Let's ask this question before we get out of here. What's up, Jolene?
I was wondering about the registration. I just clicked the link and it says the registration is closed.
For which one? Oh, September
For the
30th?
30th. Yeah.
Oh, for October Taste of Cafe. Oh no, for this
For
coming
the
cafe.
trauma and loss.
Trauma and loss one. Oh, let's see. Your information is on the webinar. We'll send you one if we open it. We'll check to see if it's full, and if I'll shoot you to be put on the wait list. Okay, Jolene?
Okay, no worry. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you. And don't forget, we have October Taste of Cafes coming up. So you can go to the website, you can visit our cafes area, and then start to register for those upcoming cafes. That's a lot. All right. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Susie and Tish, thanks so much again.